Hello guys, welcome back to finally another video about the Voynich manuscript. Today I'm going to catalog every single animal in the manuscript and rank them by their level of absurdity. Since this is the Voynich, our metric for madness is not so weird, weird, very weird, and finally the weirdest. A title reserved for the single most bizarre beast in the entire book. About 65% of the manuscript consists of two botanical sections. The first is what we call the herbal section, featuring one large plant drawing per page. The second is the pharma section, or the small plants section. Here we find rows of plant parts, each with a pharmaceutical vessel or something that looks like it, and a text block. That's a lot of greenery, but are there any critters hiding in the undergrowth? We should spot 4 distinct species among the plants. Let's start with these 2 snakes on folio 49R. Compared to what's coming, these are completely normal. Their long beaks and pouty expressions are a bit unsettling, but considering many medieval Europeans never saw an actual real serpent in the flesh, this is about as accurate as we could expect. Snakes are probably the most common animal in medieval herbal traditions. The idea was to draw an ailment's cause, like a snake or a scorpion, next to the botanical remedy. What's unusual in our case is that 2 snakes weave through holes in the roots, while conventionally a single serpent is sufficient to indicate an antidote. One exception is a specific plant, the basilisca, traditionally shown with exactly 3 snakes of specific colors. I did find one plant with 2 snakes in a 15th century Dioscorides manuscript. Marco Ponzi and I tried for some time to decipher the labels in Greek cursive, but we couldn't really figure out what plant this is supposed to be. It's the closest match I found, even if the composition and behavior are entirely different. For the ranking, I'm only interested in the portrayal of the animal, and since these are clearly recognizable as snakes, I'd say they're not so weird. Our next contestant for the title of weirdest of them all is this cute little dragon on folio 25V, caught nibbling on a leaf. It appears to have 2 legs, feathered wings, and a floral tail. Some of you might be thinking, actually, that is not a dragon, it's a wyvern. But in the world of medieval herbal manuscripts, these bipedal creatures were simply called serpents. That's right. Pictorial traditions make little distinction between serpents with legs and wings and more standard danger noodles. They weren't exactly rigorous with their mythobiological taxonomies. In this context, a dragon signifies the same thing as a snake. Either there's an etymological link with the plant's name, or the plant helps against venomous bites. Several researchers have specifically noted a stylistic similarity to the plants of the alchemists tradition, where these dragons serve as a visual shorthand for antivenom. The Voynich dragon, or serpent, faces the plant in the same manner. The differences are mostly stylistic. Just like those snakes that look like they want to kiss you, our little dragon looks a bit more bubbly and cheerful than its monstrous counterparts. The stubby floral tail is quite different, but overall I believe the dragon is not so weird. Let's now hop over to the small plant section, which boasts well over 200 plant parts, but only 2 animals. On folio 102R we encountered this unassuming frog or toad, and if you have the right scans in front of you, you may catch a glimpse of its skittish companion hiding in the folds. The quality of the parchment here is really awful, but I think I can see a green slender creature with a long tail and a head with a pointy proboscis. And I use proboscis in the most general way here. It has a point on its face, okay. I can't quite make out the leg count. It could be 4, 6, or more. Frogs or toads are drawn in some plant manuscripts, especially those that list a wider variety of single ingredients. You heard that right, ingredients. For example, this Dioscorides manuscript suggests boiling a frog in oil and salt to treat skin conditions, or using frog blood to alleviate a toothache. Since we know what this animal represents and its placement is thematically consistent, the frog is, again, Not so weird. The same cannot be said for its companion. Despite the long spike on its face, it reminds me most of the way they drew things like lizards and salamanders. But it could be an insect as well. Both insects and lizards are included in manuscripts like the one we just saw, so the context is appropriate. This section of the Voynich manuscript also has what looks like a mushroom here and a blue-yellow cube of some material. So I would argue that it mimics or draws inspiration from one of these traditions with broader ingredients than just plants. As an animal, however, I can only call this taxonomical nightmare very weird. We'll now leave the plants behind and continue our journey through the manuscript until we find our next animal. I sure hope it's less scaly and slimy this time. Oh, this looks like a petting zoo in comparison. Indeed, we have arrived in the Zodiac section. And for once, we're at an advantage. These pages follow the astrological order, starting with Pisces for some reason, so we know which species are intended. You'll notice that someone, probably later in the 15th century, added month names. I'll do a video about those very soon. The fish are actually really good. Maybe it's all smooth sailing from here on out? Don't get me wrong, there are big issues with this image as a zodiac sign, but we're only concerned about the animals now. There's no discussion about which species is intended. They are in line with tradition, markedly better than some other ones I've seen, so I'm happy to announce that the fish are normal. Following the zodiac, Aries is up next. So we know for sure that this animal should be a ram. And this one also, wait, there aren't supposed to be two of them. Is this more bizarre Voynich behavior? Well, our current understanding is that this choice was purely pragmatic. You see, each symbol is surrounded by 30 human figures, maybe representing degrees or days. Let's not get into that right now. But in Aries and Taurus alone, the artist split the 30 figures into two groups of 15 across 2 pages, and that's likely done due to spatial constraints, because they only have this relatively small flap of parchment for those. That said, let's focus on the animal itself. Initially, I thought the lack of the ram's spiral horns would be a problem, but you can really find all degrees of curvature in medieval art. More problematic is the animal's apparent feeding behavior. Sheep are grazers, preferring to crop grass and select herbs that they like, close to the ground. Goats, on the other hand, eat more of everything, and they especially like to climb up on things to feast on trees and shrubs. So, why is our ram doing goat stuff? I personally suspect that this may be a case of accidental, forced perspective. Animal scenes are often set against a background with terrain and a couple of trees, so I think that originally this tree must have been a background element that the Voynich artist, or we as the modern viewer, reinterpret as a snack. I'm still going with weird for this one because of the confusion of species. Also, its face is creepy and I think it's got 3 ears. We continue the theme of animal husbandry with Taurus, the bull. I'm placing this one squarely in the weird category already, cause there's no world in which this is normal. The neck is elongated and upright like a horse or a deer. The horns are long and lyre-shaped, resembling some kind of antelope. Its raised front leg gives the impression of movement, but while apparently walking, it's also eating from some contraption that doesn't look ergonomic at all. And to top it all off, its hind legs bend in a way that defies skeletal logic. Now, I'm being a bit flippant about it, but actually these bulls tell us 2 important things about Voynich animals, which I need you to keep in mind for the rest of the video. The first is that it really becomes clear here that the Voynich artist was inexperienced, making various beginner's mistakes against anatomy. Over at Voynich Ninja we sifted through hundreds of bulls, and we found only one other instance with broken joints. This poor creature, which frankly looks like 2 dudes in a bull suit from medieval Timu. Second, though, is that some other remarkable features are common in iconographic traditions. For example, we had no trouble finding bulls with horse necks and elongated horns. So everything we've seen so far is consistent with someone drawing from existing pictorial traditions and definitely not from nature. We'll skip over Gemini because we're only doing non-human animals and move right on to Cancer. I spent a lot of time researching the lineage of this image several years ago, which really deserves its own video, so I'll be very brief here. Lobsters' legs are not supposed to be on their tail. This is definitely weird. Moving along the celestial belt, we encounter the sign of Leo on folio 72V. And this is an interesting one. It's a blue beast with a sharp tongue, its tail tucked between its legs, poking up behind its body like a palm tree. Its mane, the universal regalia of the king of beasts, is reduced to a mere scruff around its slender neck. Now, all of its features are found in medieval art, but they're not very common, especially the spiky tongue. It's as if, when selecting the traits for their Leo, the artist said, just give me the most obscure version of everything. Another interesting thing about this lion, which is better explained by the artist's utter lack of spatial insight than by tradition, is the fact that the mouth, eyes, and ears don't show a coherent perspective. So, yeah, the lion is weird. Now the time has come for the last animal of our zodiac, which is Scorpio. A scorpion. I'll start by showing that decent scorpion images were at hand in various European pictorial traditions. So, we could have a decent one here, but instead the Voynich manuscript thinks a scorpion looks like this. To be honest, quadrupedal Scorpios are not unheard of in medieval Europe, especially in those areas where people weren't familiar with the animals. France, in particular, was a prolific producer of Scorpios that don't look like scorpions. So as a Scorpio, the star sign, this is apparently okay, I guess. But today's game is not about star sign, it's about animals. And I'll just assume that most people would agree that this is a very weird scorpion. Okay, so that was the Zodiac section. Rest assured, the best is yet to come. First, though, let's quickly address these birds from one of the manuscript's various four-way diagrams. Their surroundings are as surreal as it gets, really, in true Voynich fashion. But the birds themselves are not weird at all, and they exhibit standard avian behaviors like nesting in foliage and flying. For completeness sake, I'll also add this doodle from folio 116V, usually taken as some kind of goat or sheep. I'm gonna be mild here and add it to the normal category, since this is just the kind of thing you expect from a quick marginal sketch, and we just don't have enough line work here to really say much about this. With that out of the way, it's time to wade into the deep end. We only have a handful of animals left, and they're all in what is universally regarded as the manuscript's most enigmatic section. Quire 13, also known as the balneological section or the biological section. Scholarship never settled on a single name for this one. This section is also where people's imaginations tend to run wild. The creatures within it are open to interpretation, to say the least. This is folio 79V. We'll first focus on what appears to be the manuscript's only interaction between man and beast. And what an interaction it is. Some people refer to this combination of human and fish as the mermaid. Sirens and other kinds of hybrids are common in medieval art, but I don't think they have much to do with this image. Zoom in on the area where fish and female figure meet, and you'll notice why. We can see her legs, one of them raised as if she wants to disembark. Moreover, the supposed tail has two eyes of its own. Now, compare the position of the animal's eyes to the slit of its maw. Does this remind you of something we just discussed? Remember the inconsistent perspective of the lion's face? We see the same spatial dissonance here. The eyes presume a top-down view, while the mouth is in profile. Everything suggests that fish and human are two separate entities. Mermaids, by definition, lack lower limbs, and their tails don't have eyes. Instead, as several researchers have pointed out, the scene likely borrows from the iconography of Jonah re-emerging from the great fish after 3 days. There are strong compositional parallels even though the Voynich figure is female. Having now established that a fish is a separate creature indeed, I'd say that it's in line with what we'd expect from a medieval artist. Well, apart from its facial geometry, that's just weird, which feels like an appropriate category. Now, before I show you the 4 remaining creatures on this page, there's something we need to discuss. You see, I think a lot of people will be drawn in by the understandable desire to observe the drawing, focus on the overall appearance of the creature or certain specific properties, and then lock in a species. And that's just not the best approach to medieval art, especially when it comes to more exotic fauna. So to kind of set a baseline here, to make you feel how bad you actually are at this, I want to play a game. The rules are really simple. I show you an animal for 5 seconds, you pause the video for as long as you like, and make a guess. And I'll save you from the more obscure monstrosities like the papillones or the Grecosenderon. So all of the ones I'll show you are existing animals that even children should know. Okay, what's this? That is a beaver. Second question. What are these? They're all the same animal. If you guessed 4 more beavers, you are correct. The next one won't be a beaver, I swear. What's this? This is a crocodile, and probably my favorite medieval animal picture of all time. Notice these fabulous spiked hooves. For this next one, I went to the wonderful website bestiary.ca and collected all illustrations they had for one particular animal. Which one? If you somehow guessed elk or moose, congratulations. Last one, same deal as before. If you put everything together and blend it into something that's definitely not a mammal, you may have a shot here. These are obviously chameleons. You see how a game of telephone through imagery can turn a reptile into a fabulous horse. The artist's lack of familiarity with the creature allows these illustrations to drift further and further away from reality, and we've seen with our scorpion that the Voynich artists play along with this game. We're now in the right mindset to tackle these 4 weirdos. The green one is elongated with dots along its flank and a split tail. You could read this as a fishtail, but as Taurus teaches us, the fork could also indicate a tuft. The blue one also has a split tail and a head that looks like a crab's claw. The yellow one has a long neck with a curve that's higher than its head, like a swan. It's got a lion's tail, maybe claws, and a long nose. The red one has a weird posture. It might be frolicking in the water, or maybe it's dead. And a ridged spine, or maybe that's fur, whatever. So, what are these? The only answer is, we don't know what these are. Now, it's not that I don't want to know. I hope that it's only a matter of time before we find something in another manuscript that illuminates what the Voynich artist is trying to do here. Throughout this video, I've kept hammering on one thing, which is that the animal pictures in the Voynich are based on other animal pictures. Snakes, a dragon, a frog, and other crawly things are among the plants because of pictorial traditions, and they look the way they do because of those traditions. The bull looks like this because images of bulls with horse necks and antelope horns had somehow developed in the preceding century and had become fashionable in some regions. This bull is the cattle of manuscript arts, not of the pastures. So I hope tradition will one day also explain these 4. But as things stand now, I can only call them very weird. Okay, so we have now ranked all the animals in the manuscript, apart from one. All that is left is to award the main prize for what is the weirdest and certainly the most controversial animal in the world's most mysterious manuscript. I'm sure some of you already know which one I'm talking about. It's got a 25-page thread at Voynich Ninja, and it regularly rears its ugly head to wreak havoc on other conversations. The mystery begins with its surroundings. This pattern, which could be seen as waves but more often symbolizes a boundary between heaven and earth, often found in religious context or astronomy. The weirdest beast of them all is placed above the line, with underneath it a rather intense-looking female figure. Its legs are short, with an unclear amount of toes on each foot. The tail, like that of so many other Voynich critters, ends in a fork. The head is very flat and hard to make out, with an eye, probably a mouth, and a horn or a pointy ear. It's completely upside down due to the creature's extremely curved posture. The rest of its body appears to be, at first glance, clad in very large scales. So, which animal does this represent? If you ask me, the answer is, say it all with me, we don't know. Until hopefully one day we're lucky enough to find something in medieval art that illuminates this thing to a degree that most researchers find satisfactory. In that regard, it's not much different from the four creatures on folio 79V. Several people over the decades are absolutely convinced that this is an armadillo, a New World species known for its huge fish scales, banded armor, in an early 15th century European codex. And others still claim it's a pangolin, an Asian and African species that only entered European consciousness centuries later. And then the armadillo people and the pangolin people argue about which of both species is more naturalistically represented by the manuscript, which, may I again remind you, relies on medieval manuscript traditions and struggles with basic anatomy and thinks that this is a fine scorpion indeed. What's always bothered me about this beast is not only that it's got abnormally large scales, but also that they're on backwards. Nobody ever tries to explain this. Until a couple of weeks ago, when I noticed that the Voynich artist does actually know which way scales go. I looked again at that split tail of the bull, and then realized that as far as we know, this indicates tufts of hair. And from the Taurus, my eye wandered to Aries. And then it hit me. What if it's fur? Just like the tail, it can show us how the Voynich artists like to represent certain things. These three bands of curved lines represent Aries' rough fur. It's much harder to see on folio 80V because it's a smaller drawing and the line work is faded and obscured by paint. But comparing it to Aries, one of which has the exact same color, sheds some light on the situation. Therefore, I would say that using the indications the manuscript itself provides, our best bet is to read this critter as furry with a tufted tail. But you know what, that probably doesn't even matter because some of you are already running to the comments to ignore everything I said and write, well, it sure looks like an armadillo to me. And that's why this beast is by far the weirdest of them all. Well, that concludes today's video. I hope you enjoyed our stroll through the world's weirdest zoo, and I'll see you next time.